Our next guest on the pod is inspiring you to be powerful and to do it scared. She's a pre-vivor of the BRCA1 and a melanoma cancer survivor. As a mother of 3, she's taken life-changing steps in her life to limit her chances of breast cancer while also training for the world major marathons. We are wicked excited to have Kristina Coccoluto on the On the Runs podcast. What's up, Kristina?
Hey, thank you for having me.
We are so happy that you're here joining us today, even with all of that little technical difficulties we had, but you stuck with it. And now we can jump right in and have some fun. So welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with both of you.
Absolutely. I think we're just talking about you probably have one of the most fun last names of all our guests outside of Knutnen, which is a mouthful. I'm looking at yours. I was so scared. And then you go, it's Coccoluto. I'm like, that's so easy. That's so awesome.
It looks exactly how it sounds, but it's very intimidating. I'll give it to you. It's a lot of C's and a lot of O's.
Yep. Just like a lot of U's and T's and N's for me. But yeah.
Right.
So, hey, we have a really cool connection. We call friends of the pod, people who've been on the podcast before, our pod fam. And by the way, welcome to the pod fam. But we have a pretty close connection with Jay Duncan.
We sure do. Yeah. You trying to figure out now how Jay and I know each other?
I am, at least. I'm itching to know.
All right. Well, actually, it was through my story being told on television. So when I was telling my story on TV, yes, Jay actually saw my story and then reached out on Instagram because my story was kind of the window during her treatment to say, hey, if she can do this, then I can do this. And that's why we tell our stories, right? So that other people feel inspired to do it and get out there and do what you need to do. And so actually, I met Jay while she was running the Boston Marathon. So I waited at mile 25 and she spotted me and was like, oh, God. Yeah.
No way.
We met. Yeah. I told her, I said, of course I'll come cheer you on. And so I went at mile 25 and we had the best, biggest hug. Yeah. I'll have to ask Jay to send you guys a picture of that. It was awesome.
Aw, I feel like I might have seen it already, but what a way to finish the marathon with a hug from a friend and just get it. I can't believe that was the first time you guys actually met in person.
Yeah. I mean, like when she started following the story, she was just like, hey, how do I get on this team? How do I start this process? Where do I go? So we just easily connected and she learned that you have to just do it scared, but we'll get there.
We'll get there.
Very nice. I like that. It's got a nice ring to it. All right, Kristina. So now that we broke the ice a little bit, I want to know more about you. I mean, Jay got to know you. I think it's our turn. Why don't you tell us a little more about you? Like, I want to know from birth to now. Like, tell me all about you. Where did you grow up? What did you do? Like in school, did you do sports? Was running always your thing?
Well, if we're going from birth, then we're going to have to start with my birthday. And now that you know it, you'll be invited to my party. Okay. So actually, my birthday is New Year's Eve. So that's why it's a fun
Wicked fun.
Yeah. Except it kind of is a lot of pressure because then everyone's like, so what are we doing tonight? And then I'm like, oh, I got to come up with something. But no.
You ever just want to have those days where you're like, I just want to be in my PJs and like stay up till midnight and then just go to bed.
Like, hope I can make it to midnight now and then I'm an old lady. But yeah, so I'm from Stoneham, Massachusetts. No, I'm 38, but I am from Stoneham, Massachusetts. I started running. Actually, I always loved basketball. Basketball is my sport, but as I got older, I realized that it really wasn't my sport. I didn't have the skills. And I started running track because I didn't want to go home after school. Like I was like, oh, I got to play a sport. So I guess I'll go for the track team. And I was so arrogant and so cocky thinking like, I'm going to slay these people. I'm just going to get out there and run. I mean, in my mind, I thought that track was just where nerds who couldn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like they can't play a real sport, so they go out for track. Like that was my impression of track. And then I was
and how did that go?
Like, oh wow, these people are like goddamn Olympians. Okay, so I learned really quickly that I was completely wrong about track. I started out with the 600 for indoor track and the 800 for outdoor, and ran the 4x4, and I fell in love with the sport because I think it showed me what you put into it is what you get out of it.
Very nice. That is a great lesson. Did you continue it when you did college or
I didn't run in college. I had fun in college. So,
You're here.
We did too.
My parents I went to a D1 school, and I just told my parents straight up, like, there's not a chance. I'm going to go have fun. I don't want that kind of pressure. I don't want to. Yeah. So I did not. I did like some 5Ks here and there, and I kind of let running live in the background, and I did it recreationally for fun here and there.
Yeah.
But I will say that running is where, from in high school to now in my adult life, it's where you connect back to you. It's where I could find that little voice inside of me and realize that, oh, my intuitive voice comes when I run. So if you ever have heard me speak, I often talk about how I don't identify as a runner.
How come?
And everybody's like, you run marathons, you're a runner, cut the shit, And I'm like, no, I'm not a runner in the sense that, yes, I am a runner, but I'm not a runner in the sense that every day I lace up and just got to get my run in because it makes me feel good. I am not that kind of runner.
And that's okay.
Yeah, I'm a mission runner. Like, I do it when I have something that I have to prove to myself, or I need it again because there's a reason underneath the surface. But it's not an everyday thing for me. So that's what I mean.
That's totally okay. And for a lot of people, I mean, even for me, it took me a long time to kind of build the habit of doing a run or a walk or some kind of motion every day. So, I mean, and that's just totally okay if that's not everybody's thing.
I'm the type that needs it on the calendar. But that's what does it for me. Get it on the calendar, get a race on the calendar. When I do a race, I need to get the next one on the calendar today, or else I'm not going to run for a few weeks.
Absolutely. That's exactly how I am.
So you ran in high school. You had fun in college, just like Erica and I did. Erica and I really found running after college. And it sounds like you found running after college as well. But maybe at some point in there, you also knew you had some health risk.
Totally.
And I don't know if running was before that or after. Why don't you tell us the story?
Yeah. So I was running in high school, obviously, right? Graduated, go off to college. And then in the middle of college, I actually had a major health scare. I had melanoma when I was 20 years old. So I was away at school. Yep. And I think I listened on another podcast guest talk about this, but when you don't have running because you learn that it's taken away from you, it becomes very apparent that it's something that you want to get back to because you realize I get to. And so when I had a health scare of having the deadliest form of skin cancer, after also growing up with cancer in my household, there's hereditary cancer in my family. And I can explain how that works. And it sounds pretty awful. And I know it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and you're hearing an awful lot about breast cancer. Well, for me, running was always in the background as a tool to kind of get out of up here in my head and into my heart, because my health was something that has always been a priority. Like, I was green juicing before it was cool. I was always active and always thought that I could outpace cancer by exercising and having a healthy diet and a positive lifestyle. So I thought, I'm a pretty positive person. I think I'll be okay. I'm going to just figure this out and dodge this thing. That's not how cancer works. So you just learn really quickly that with hereditary cancer, you have to continue to outpace it through research and find out what's out there. So when I found out I had melanoma, I was 20. It was on my leg, actually, on my right leg. And it was something that I just had a spot that I didn't like. And I had my plastic surgeon, because I wanted a teeny tiny scar, just remove it and send it off to pathology. And I got a phone call back saying, hey, actually, this is melanoma. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. No way. And he's like, yeah, you need to come back in. We have to come up with a plan.
Oh, wow.
So at 20 years old, I felt like, oh my gosh, my whole family has been dealing with cancer my whole life. And so that's where the story really begins with my health journey. But if we were talking about my relationship to cancer, it began when I was much smaller. So my mom is a 2-time breast cancer survivor, and all of the women on my mom's side of the family have experienced either breast and or ovarian cancer. Oh, wow. So when you see all of the women in your life experiencing cancer, like, I grew up with a mom who was always either in treatment or her sister was in treatment, and it was normal be bald or lose your hair. And the things that were living on in the background started when I was about 7 years old. So I don't really have memories of life before cancer. So some of that was really normal, but then also you realize how not normal it is because it just lives beneath the surface and causes so much anxiety. So running came into play where it was just like you got to leave home behind and the things that you were feeling behind and focus inward on myself. So that was always a tool. But for my mom, so she was, my mom was 39 when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, which is very young. And for me, I was 10 years old at the time. And you're so fixated on your friends and, that tween lifestyle that I wasn't really thinking about anything other than my friends, what I was doing after school. It wasn't sports related, but I just wanted to escape family life. And that continued to happen, not because I come from a bad family. I love my family, but it was just that heartache for what goes on inside your house.
Yeah.
And what I will say is that my aunt, my mom's sister, passed away 6 months before I found out I had melanoma. So I was 19 when my aunt died, and then 6 months later, I get cancer myself. So there was this heavy hit that it's coming for me. And so my life was moving on forward, and I, at 25, was having a conversation with my gynecologist about birth control. And inside, I knew I had read data about whether birth control is good for you or bad for you based on synthetic hormones if you have a strong family history. And on one hand, it can be great for reducing your risk for ovarian cancer, which runs in my family, but it can increase your risk for breast cancer. So it's like, I just don't know what the best thing for me to do is. And she was just like, have you thought about getting tested to see if you carry a genetic mutation in your family? And I was like, no. And the funny thing is that, so I knew that we had a genetic mutation in my family. We just didn't talk about it. My mom didn't talk about it. My aunts didn't talk about it because you leave that in the past. Just everything will be fine. And you move on, you shove it under the rug. And I realized that made me feel like, okay, so am I at risk for this? Am I going to have this? How does this work?
Right. And that's like a heavy thing to have on your mind. Yeah.
For sure. And if your family's not a talker of these subjects, you kind of start to learn that, okay, I'm just going to cause everybody else anxiety because this is just bringing up everybody's trauma. And there's a thing about genetic mutations. And I realize, and I understand it now that I'm a mom, but you have the risk of passing it on to your child. So that feeling of my mom felt like if I give this to you, it's my fault that you have to endure this. So there's this kind of level of let's just not talk about it until we have to. And all of a sudden I'm 25 and we have to have this discussion. So I took the test. It's just a simple blood test, but I didn't have genetic counseling. And this is why I'm a huge proponent of saying, do not do a 23andMe test or an ancestry.com test to find out if you have anything going on with your health, because you want to sit down with a geneticist to go over what the plan would be. Because in the event you find out that you do have something, you're going to want to know what the plan is. And you do not want to be Googling it because the dark side of the web on Googling these kinds of issues are horrific. And then you just get swamped with negativity. So I find out I, in fact, am BRCA positive. So I think this would be a great time to educate all of your listeners on what that really means.
Absolutely.
Please, myself included.
Yeah. So everybody knows about the BRCA1 from Angelina Jolie, but this was pre-Angelina Jolie coming out because she's BRCA1 positive. And so before this, nobody heard of this really. It wasn't really a household conversation or something that was a main headline. It was just kind of this really bad thing that you just don't want to have happen to you. And it's really rare if it does. But then I'm like, but it is me. So now what?
Yeah.
So I kind of learned the hard way, which would be Googling everything on your own, coming up with it, bringing it back to your doctor, having everything dissected and talking about. So the BRCA mutation works like this. So Eric, you both have BRCA1 and 2 genes in your body, just like me. My gene is mutated. So your BRCA genes are used every single day to help filtrate anything in your system that's wonky, and it would kind of make sure that it passes through and cleans it all up. Since mine's broken, it takes everything that is meant to be broken and gathers them together to form what would be a tumor in your body. There was an 87% chance that I would have breast cancer in my lifetime.
That is a way too high of a chance. Okay.
Yeah. There is
that's really tough to deal with. Like,
yeah.
We'll get into that. I'll let you, continue.
Yeah, for sure. And then a 60% risk of ovarian cancer. And ovarian cancer has no screening. It is the deadliest cancer because the symptoms of ovarian cancer, it's known as the silent killer because there's nothing that you can really do to detect it. The symptoms of ovarian cancer are bloating, feeling full quickly, or gas.
Wow.
So you would say, like, how often do you feel bloated or like fart?
Eating a big meal. Come on.
Right. Like, so you sit there and say, like, is like, I would literally be like, so if I fart, do I call my doctor? Like, what do you do? You're like, the anxiety is real. Like,
yeah.
So can't trust a fart.
You cannot.
Especially in that case.
Code brown commandment. Don't trust a fart.
It's the right podcast for this conversation.
Seriously, yeah.
But there's other cancers that you're at risk for too. So there's also a smaller chance, much smaller chance, but pancreatic cancer is one of them. Melanomas are others. Colon cancers, like the list goes on, and it does not feel good to hear. But at the same time, when you know your risk, you're empowered to be able to do something about it. So you can reduce your risk once you know what it is. And the scary piece of all of this is that many of your listeners could have the BRCA mutation and just not know it, because you can inherit a BRCA mutation from your father or your mother. So if someone is a carrier in your family, there is a 50-50 chance that you would inherit it, because you could either inherit your dad's copy of his BRCA gene or your mom's copy. And if one of them has a mutation, it's 50-50, you would inherit it. So there was a 50% chance that I inherited my mom's or my dad's. So I have two sisters. One sister tested positive for the BRCA mutation and another sister tested negative. So it truly is, it's 50-50 for each person if it exists in your family. So kind of how you would know if you should get tested for the BRCA mutation. Some red flags would be if you have family members who have been diagnosed with any type of cancer under the age of 50. It's something to talk to your doctor about if there's a pattern of that. You would want to bring this information to your PCP and say, hey, wait a second, I have two family members on my dad's side or my mom's side, whatever it may be, that were diagnosed at 51, like at 41 or, 39. One had breast cancer, the other one had colon cancer, and they happen to both be on the same side of the family. They might say, okay, let's do a full screen panel. There are other genetic mutations that are not BRCA1 and BRCA2. So it's always good that if you do see a sort of any person in your family getting diagnosed younger than 50, you're having a conversation with your doctor, especially if a death has occurred in your family as well.
That is really, really good to put out there. Good for listeners, good for myself, just in case, just something to think about. You're right.
I will also say that even though cancer is a heavy topic and it's not a sexy thing to talk about, part of my story and why I love telling my story is because my story has a happy ending. And I think that this is where we can get to the good stuff when it comes to running in my story. So when I found out I was BRCA positive, I was 25 years old. And the ways that you can reduce your risk when you're BRCA positive are tamoxifen, which is a drug that puts you into chemical menopause, which I was like, hell no, I'm 25. I don't want to go through menopause. This is crazy.
Yeah.
So that wasn't an option, but that some people may choose to take a pill because that might be the route for them. I said, there's not a chance. I don't want that.
Yeah.
Another option is to surgically remove your breasts, have a double mastectomy. And at 25, I was not okay with that option either. I literally was like, I just got boobs. How can I remove them? This makes no sense. I was so upset.
Right.
And so I chose to go through surveillance. And surveillance is every 6 months rotating between a mammogram and a breast MRI. And so I did that for a while. And I can tell you right now, I was going through the worst version of myself at that time because every 6 months, I felt like I had a ticking time bomb in my body. I felt like one day I am going to be told I have cancer, and now I'm just waiting, and this doesn't feel good. And another thing would be at 25, it's not the normal recommended age for a mammogram. So I would walk into a waiting room and have severe anxiety because everyone was significantly older. And so I would feel like, how do I tell my boss I have to go for a mammogram when that's not the recommended age? Like, that sounds like I'm lying. These are things like at 25 that matter to you because you're young, you're green, you're insecure, you have gone through all the things. And I think the other piece is I was so fixated at that point, like, I want to get married, I want to have a family. I was going through all of those motions, and this was living on in the background. So I have to tell you.
So this all happened before you met your husband and before you had your kids?
No, my husband and I have been together since high school.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So he has been on the ride the entire time. So he saw the track stars become so go through all of this. And so my husband at 25, I was like, it's been 8 years. Let's go.
Right.
So, and my doctors were also saying, like, giving me tips on how I could reduce my risk. Having a baby under the age, your first baby under the age of 30 greatly reduces your risk for breast cancer. Never knew that until I was going through it, but nothing really set your soul on fire to want to have a baby. Like somebody saying, well, this is the thing that's going to reduce your risk for cancer. You're like, oh, great. Now I have to be a mom. Like, I'm not ready for this. So I was in such like a bad way about it. I was just like, I feel so much pressure. I feel like I have to have my whole life plan within these 5 years. I'm not there yet. And
yeah, that's so young.
So young. For a career, I was an event planner at the time. And so I was always planning. Everything was thought about. Everything was planned. It was that type A runner type girl, just so I decided I would have surveillance until I couldn't handle it anymore. And I said, I will know when that time comes. It just is what it is. Yeah. So I got married. I got engaged. He listened. Chris, my husband's name is Chris. Chris listened. At 25, we got engaged. Yeah. 26, we got married. And at 27, I had my first baby. Like, planned everything out.
There you go.
Then at 29, I found a lump in my breast.
Oh, no.
Yeah. That is the catalyst where everything changed. That was the moment where I said, no. So if you're a Bostonian type person, this year that this occurred was in 2015. And that was the year in that winter, the snow was up past the stop signs.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't melt in May that year. Wow. So when you find a lump in your breast, so I was doing a self-breast exam, which is another opportunity to say that if you should be doing a self-breast exam once a month, preferably 2 weeks after your period. Sorry, Eric. But doing
it's actually a good stat you just told me, or a fact, 2 weeks after a period, because in the past people just said, like, put it on your calendar the first of every month. But if you, being a woman, if you know your cycle, do it in the middle there. I'm guessing that's the first time I've heard of that.
Every month, it's better to do it than not do it at all. But it's also like people say, feel it on the first. That's a big trend. I personally think you could do it more than once a month if you wanted to, if it's on your radar when you're shaving.
Doesn't hurt, right?
No, and you're shaving.
Go for it.
You could do it multiple times a day.
You could have your partner do it. It is what it is. But you go, you feel around, lay back, put your arm up, and you kind of move in a circular motion all the way around. Well, I was in the shower and I felt what I know feels like cancer because I had been an advocate for it for a long time. And if you feel a lump in your breast that feels like a frozen pea, or it's like larger than the tip of an eraser, and it persists for more than 2 weeks, it's time to call your doctor. I knew that when I felt that frozen pea, I was calling my doctor right away. So I called my doctor, and that day she was like, come in right now for an emergency mammogram. I went in for my mammogram, and Erica, I don't know if you've ever had one yet, but so there's a moment where they squish your boob in and they tell you to don't breathe. Take a deep breath in and don't breathe. And I remember thinking like, I might never breathe again. I feel so nervous right now. And everything came flooding in my mind. Like, am I going to be okay? Am I going to make it through this moment? And I'm trying to like, do I crack jokes right now? Like, I don't know how to get out of this moment. And the way that that radiologist room was set up, I could see the mass on the screen as I was looking. And I was like, shit, there it is. And they were like, I watched them pull me into the other room. And now when you get mammograms every 6 months, you know the difference, or mammograms and MRIs. So you know that you get pulled into a room where you go to cry and you can hear people crying, or you get pulled in and told you to go. And I'm getting pulled in the crying room and I'm going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I felt my legs come out from underneath me. Like, do you have anyone that you'd like to call to come meet you? We're going to have a breast surgeon meet and we need to do a core needle biopsy today. And I was like, yeah, I guess I will call and at the time it was my husband, obviously. So I call my husband and he's like, I'm in Boston right now. Like, I'll be right there at work. And I was like, okay, just get here when you can. They started the surgery. And what they do is they insert a tiny little clip that looks like the size of a staple to mark the tumor. In the event it's benign, they want to know for all your future mammograms that lives there and they've already looked at it. Gotcha. And if it's cancerous, it's coming out anyway. So I remember looking up at that ceiling and praying at that moment. And I'm not really religious, but I had this really spiritual moment of being like, well, maybe I'll start going to church. Maybe I'll do whatever. Like you just like do like
bargaining, right?
Please, I just don't, please don't be cancer. Please don't be cancer. I don't want my daughter growing up the way that I grew up. I don't want my daughter fearing for my health, for my life. I don't want that for her. And then the lab shut down for 10 days because of all of the snow.
No.
So I did not get my results for 10 days.
Oh my God.
So what is going through your head? Are you just spiraling? Are you trying to keep yourself calm? Like how are you dealing with this?
Gonna go for a run.
And the snow.
Yep, it's pretty go for a run. So we were trapped inside and I tormented my husband every single night. He'd fall asleep and I'd shake him and I'd be like, Chris, tell me, what do you think? So I don't really want a Catholic funeral. I'm thinking I fully planned like my celebration of life. It's like, and he was just like, he'd look at me and be like, Kristina, shut the fuck up. Go back to bed. Not a big deal. You don't know, you could be totally fine. Don't get until you just stop. Go to bed. Go back to bed. And it would be like,
there's no way you can shut that off. Well, no way.
No.
And then
I would spiral.
The other thing is you had an 87% chance of breast cancer and a 60% chance of ovarian cancer. So a lot of people would think it's not if, it's when.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And at that point, I'm sitting there saying like, oh boy, this is it. Like I might not have the life that I thought I was going to. Could all be. And then came the feeling of stupidity. Like, oh my God, I should have just removed my breasts when they told me to. I feel like such a moron that I didn't do it then. And I felt like every single day that went on, I was like, oh my God, I would like look in the mirror, get out of the shower, look in the mirror and be like in disbelief that everything was about to change either way. If I don't have cancer, they have to go. I have to be done. And if I have cancer, well, screw it. This is going to be one hell of a ride. And then I got the phone call that I didn't have cancer. And so that's when I decided I was going to run my first marathon.
Oh, okay.
So that moment, right then and there, I said, you know what? I've never ran more than a 5K, but I've always watched every single year. I watched the Boston Marathon and I would stand right at the finish line. And I knew that was something I would always whisper to myself, someday I'm going to do that. Someday I'm going to do that. Someday. And it did not make sense to do it that year. Personally, it was not the best year. It was, we were moving from our condo into a house.
And it was like less than 2 months away.
Well, I didn't do Boston. I did Chicago, but I knew that I wanted to run a marathon. So because it was less than 2 months away, I knew that it wouldn't be Boston. So that's why I had it be Chicago. And everybody, when you're from the Boston area, everybody thinks that there's only one marathon to run. When I would tell everybody like, hey, I'm running the Chicago Marathon, they're like, is that 26.2 like Boston? Like, yes, it's a world major, like trying to describe it. And, it is. But it was really incredible. So I was really nervous about making that decision of like, do I really want to run a marathon this year? We're moving.
I think a couple glasses of wine helped.
They sure did. I sat there with my bottle of wine in my hand in the kitchen, and I got an email from Bright Pink because at the time, Bright Pink was an organization that focuses on helping high-risk women. I Googled, doesn't have breast cancer, but high risk for breast cancer. Because there was no such thing as the term pre-vivor that was floating around. There was no Angelina Jolie telling her story at that time. You had to go to the dark side of the internet to find another BRCA1 positive person. And let's also remember that like social media at that point wasn't where it is today.
Definitely not.
You couldn't really connect to groups the way that you can now. You were just randomly in chat rooms finding people. So it was a different time. So I decided, okay, I'm going to sign up. And when you deposit whatever that amount of money, like a couple $100, I was like, okay, I guess this is me doing it. And I'm pouring a glass of wine and my sister's with me and she's like, shit. I'm like, what? She's like, you're not doing it alone. I'm going to do it with you. And I'm like, no way, let's go. So, the two of us are like hysterical. We're like laughing, crying, being like, are we doing this? Are we running a marathon? We're running a marathon. Okay, we're running a marathon. And so I call up my best friend from college, who was like one who knew Fund Me only. And I was like, hey, Meg, so I'm running a marathon. I decided I'm going to run a marathon because if I can run a marathon, I can confidently walk into an operating room. And she was like, fuck, I have to run a marathon. And I was like, are you going to do it? She's like, I'm coming to Chicago.
Yes.
And it was so funny because this is my same roommate at school that would like call me up and be like, can you come pick me up? And I'd be like, where are you? She'd be like, there's trees. I'm like, Meg, everywhere has trees. I lost a shoe. I'm like, oh my God, like that hot friend. And you're like, you realize you're going to have to like train and stuff. She's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. Like free spirited person. So we ended up having 6 friends come and run that had never run a marathon before. Amazing. Yeah, we raised a ton of money. And it was one of those things that it was a bittersweet moment. And I'll never forget the way that I felt at the starting line in Chicago because I knew my real finish line was waiting for me in an operating room. But at the same time, I had that feeling like, if I can do this, I can do anything. It's a mental game.
Absolutely.
Did you already make the appointment?
Yes. Picked out my surgeons, had the date on the calendar. And so I had my surgical date as 4 days after my 30th birthday. So January 4th.
Wow.
So when you make that kind of appointment and you say, hey, I'm a high risk and everything, is there any are they fighting back at all? Is insurance like, hey, we don't support this? Is anyone like, you don't need to do this yet?
Who pays for it too, because they know that's how high their risk is. It's cheaper for them for you to have this surgery than it is for you to get sick. So they know.
I imagine. Yeah.
So that was kind of like when people would tell me like, oh, she's electing to remove her breast. And I was like, is it really electing when insurance is paying for all of it? And that really sets the tone for other people because a lot of times pre-vivors or people in my position take a lot of flack when we publicly share our story because we don't have breast cancer and we step into the community even though we don't have it. But the reality is you're a sitting duck if you don't. You're going to have breast cancer. And when you're BRCA positive, you're likely going to get the worst kind, the kind that kills you.
That is just, I can't imagine having to go through that. And you are just so strong for realizing your risks and for taking charge before you got really sick. Cause that is just what sucks all the life out of you. You're going through treatment and it's hard on your family. And I mean, as hard as it was to make that decision to remove your breast, I mean, did that totally just get rid of it? Was that it? What was your journey like from that point on?
So once I removed my breasts, I knew, I woke up, it was really funny. So I I was really, really nervous about how I would feel about myself afterwards. And so when you're the first with anything you do in life, I was the first person in my family to remove my breasts prophylactically or with a risk reducing surgery. And that feeling of what if I made the wrong choice? Not because I wouldn't reduce my risk, but what if I have a severe complication, or what if I'm never the same? What if mentally this is the thing that pushes me over the edge? What if I like you don't realize all of the ways in which when you have a double mastectomy, you have such a disconnect with yourself afterwards, because you can have body dysmorphia. You're really hard on yourself. And I didn't realize, don't forget too, to really describe what it's like in society, like my plastic surgeon, I can describe that too, but my plastic surgeon only had images of older women. So there was no one who was 29. Like I was 29 when I was picking out my surgeon. So breasts still matter. Like I didn't even use my breasts for what they're for at that point. I wasn't done having children. So it's a different stage of life. All my friends that were picking out implants were doing it for an augmentation, not because they were reconstructing their breasts, and they're not the same thing whatsoever. No. And so I would feel super insulted because people would make stupid comments like, oh, did you just want implants? And you're like, I think I would have chosen a much psychologically less damaging route if I wanted implants.
Seriously, yeah.
It's a tough choice to make. But when I woke up from my surgery, I was on all kinds of like nerve blocks and propofol and under the influence of so many things. But the thing that I kept saying over and over again, I'd come to get out of it and say, I'm free now.
Oh,
I'm so free.
I can imagine the relief, because it's kind of over.
Did I do it? I really did it? It's over? And they'd be like, yeah, it's over. And I'd be like, wow, but this is the thing that's been involved in my life since I was 7. And you realize like, this is the thing I've been running from. And now I just ran straight to it. And that fear lifted. And I realized like, I'm bigger than this. So bring it. And I then decided afterwards, it was funny. So 1 month. So for those listeners that don't know, when you have a mastectomy, there's all kinds of options for reconstruction. You can remove your breast and have a flat aesthetic closure, which means you essentially just have one line going straight across and you are completely flat. You can utilize and use your own tissue to reconstruct a breast afterwards. I had expanders put in my chest because your breast surgeon removes all of your breast tissue, and then a plastic surgeon comes in and inserts what's called a chest expander. You have to put the expander for an implant. Usually there's different techniques, but to go underneath your pectoral muscle. So they have to stretch your chest wall cavity apart, and you go for injections each week of saline to kind of really stretch your skin out to get ready to put the implant in, because once you remove your breast tissue, nothing holds the implant up.
Oh.
It would just be like floating through your body, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of elements to this that I don't know. I'm not sure if the listeners really understand. I mean, it's hard for me to understand. So thank you for breaking this down and kind of giving, well, Eric, but thank you for giving us kind of a breakdown of how it works.
Well, it's great because I actually have heard the term quite a bit, expanders, and I'm the type in this situation who's not like, let me ask a stupid question here, but you're kind of doing it all for me. You're explaining this, and I love it.
So the expander is when you go for injections each week and they expand them, like you have to think about your chest wall cavity is expanding, and it's like something pressing in on you to get bigger. And I would joke, and my plastic surgeon was incredible. He actually did the first face transplant. I don't know if you remember the story about the woman who got attacked by the chimpanzee.
Yes.
If you remember that story in the media.
That was
my
him?
plastic surgeon was him. Yep. And Bodon is his name. And he was incredibly kind and had the best bedside manner. And he's this world-renowned plastic surgeon. And I would make that guy blush every single week when I would go get my injections, because I'd be like, well, where was this in middle school, huh? Look at me just getting pumped right up. And he'd be like, oh my goodness, nobody's ever talked like this. They're usually crying. And I'm like, no, pump it up. Let's go. like laughing. You gotta laugh, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's painful, it's uncomfortable, but I was just like, I just have to laugh. I have to just do whatever I can and then cry the whole car ride home. But you got to do what you got to do. So
yeah, that's a good attitude to have.
yeah. Well, so then you have a second surgery where they take out the expander and put an implant in. And then 1 month after that, I got pregnant right away with my second child.
Oh, really?
So I went from marathon mastectomy to pregnant in a very short period. And then my daughter was born 1 year after my mastectomy, the same month in January.
Wow.
And then I signed up for the New York Marathon because why not take the boobs on a tour? That's what we would call the fake, because they're not, boobs anymore. So I'd be like, oh, I'm bringing my boobs. We would call it Tour de Boobs. So ran the New York Marathon, Tour de Boobs. Got the worst time ever. It was so bad. I was laughing at myself because I was like, man, I'm over 5 hours. This is so bad. I was so defeated that day. And it turns out my sister ended up testing positive. So the one that ran the Chicago Marathon with me. Mm-hmm. So she all along was on this same journey of doing hard things with me and then walking through this together. So a few years later, she decided that she would remove her breasts, and I got pregnant again, and with my third, and then I realized I was done having children and it was time to reduce my risk for ovarian cancer. So I had a complete hysterectomy. So I had my cervix, fallopian tubes, uterus, ovaries, all gone.
Wow.
Which for anyone that doesn't know means that then I was going into surgical menopause at the age of 36.
Still very early from when it should happen normally,
yes,
but naturally
happens at the age of 51. So it was a big, big decision. But at the same time, I could not live with my risk being high anymore. I could not stand going for surveillance, and the surveillance isn't really there. So you'd go for a transvaginal ultrasound. Your pap smear does not screen for ovarian cancer. So a lot of people think that it does, but it does not. So that was something that I said, I just can't live like this. I can't live not knowing. And then this is the thing that this is what killed my aunt. Ovarian cancer is how my aunt died. So I said, I can't live like this. She was diagnosed in her 40s. And so my doctor said, by 40, you need to remove your ovaries. Now I just kept hearing 40. I was like, oh, 40. And then when I would go for screening, she'd look at me and say, you're healthy now. Now would be a good time.
That's not a good caveat. Now.
Yeah, exactly. You're healthy now. And the way she'd look at me is like, get it together. You can do this. And I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to do this. And so my sister was like, I'm going to run Boston. And I'm like, no. She's like, yep, I'm running Boston this year. And so, we're all a little competitive. We've been in this together. And I'm like, she can't do Boston without me. Right? So I looked, my surgery was Monday, October 3rd, 2022. The marathon was Monday, April 17th, 2023. And if you count the weeks, it's 8 weeks to recover for a hysterectomy, 20 weeks to train for a marathon. And it was exactly 28 weeks. So I was like, fuck it, I'm in. And she was like, what? I'm like, that wine, I'm coming over. And she's like, Kristina, you're out of your mind. I'm like, I'm in. Don't ask questions. I said, but here's the one thing. I'm not running for anything. I'm only running if we run for Dana-Farber, because that's where we had received all of our family has had treatment and where we had our testing and surgeries. And so she was like, okay, I'm in.
It was your sister who said she was in for Chicago, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And it was you who said you're in for Boston. Was your sister a runner before too? Or was she just like the 5K runner, just like you were?
So both my sisters played college ball. I was the only one to kind of mess around and fuck off in college. My sisters were both collegiate athletes.
So you kind of planted this seed with Chicago, and then you girls do New York, and then she's like, I'm going to do Boston. You're like, fuck yeah, let's go.
Yeah, but see, this was the thing. She messed up my plans because in my mind, I always wanted the Abbott medal. right? And so I was like, I want the medal at home in Boston. I'm going to go for it. And then I'm going to have that big glorious moment at home, you know?
That's how Eric wants to do it.
Yeah. Well, you're going to get my plan, Eric. Okay. So I wanted that big
I'll take
moment.
you with me though.
Okay. I'll run that last mile with you.
Yes. All right.
When I tell you, I was like, oh man, all right, well, if this is the way it's meant to be, this is the way it's meant to be. My whole life changed the year I ran the Boston Marathon.
What happened? Tell me more.
Oh, you want more? I haven't shut up. Okay.
I love it. I can tell you're a speaker. Like, you're doing this so well. You're running the show. Go. This is your story.
You have me on the hook, Kristina. Yeah. I'm glued to your every word.
Did Eric and Erica want to talk? Because I haven't let you.
No, this is amazing. I love listening.
So I was born a storyteller, but I
have questions, but they're for later.
Okay, you can ask.
Save them for the end.
Okay,
raise your hand.
Okay, you can always interrupt. But so I became a stay-at-home mom. I mentioned that I was an event planner, but then I became a stay-at-home mom. Once I had my daughter, I knew that I wanted to be really focused on my kids. But inside, I had this feeling of like, I know I want to work eventually. I know I don't want to be at home forever. I know I want to know, but I want to do meaningful work. I want to know what my purpose is. Mm-hmm. And so when I tell you, I was like desperate to figure out what that meant. What is my purpose? And so the year of the Boston Marathon, I have a dear friend that is an intuitive healer, but she has psychic and medium gifts. And so I was like, you need to tell me, like, what is my purpose? And we would do all of these things, like to have conversations around it. And finally, she just was like, oh my God, Kristina, for God's sakes, when you tell your story, you will find your purpose. And I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Tell me what that means. And she's like, when you tell your story, you'll know. It will all come to you the way that it's supposed to. Mm-hmm. So this is where you're going to laugh. So I get with Dana Farber. I set up my fundraising page. The day that I have surgery is when I announce that I'm running the Boston Marathon. I send out my page as I'm going under. Like,
oh my gosh,
this is my big dramatic, like, here we go. Let's fucking go. We get, when you run Boston, you got to raise 10 grand. So let's do this. So I put the page up, and within a week I hit the 10 grand.
Oh my gosh.
In October.
That was like easy peasy.
You just made a lot of people mad.
Well, look what she had to go through though. Like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So as soon as I hit that 10 grand, Dana Farber now, they're a team with 500 runners. And these people, there are people that do this for a legacy that have done it year after year after year. And they're like, who is this chick that in October raised 10 grand and she's still going? Like, what's going on? So they reach out and they're like, hey, so what's your secret sauce? Would love. And I was just saying, like, I'm just sharing my story. And they're like, well, what's your story? And I tell them my story. And the woman on the other end is like, will you tell that story as a panelist on our call? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. And I didn't realize, because there's 500 runners on the team, that 150 people would be on a Zoom call. So I was like, oh, I have to tell my story on Zoom, and I've never told it before. So I told my story on a Zoom call, and I'm like, maybe I'm going to find my purpose. Like, this is it. I'm like, tell my story, and someone's going to show me my purpose because I'm telling my story.
Did you love it?
So as I'm telling my story on the Zoom call, they're like, everybody before me to say, like, what's your fundraising secret? And I'm like, well, every single person took all that was a panelist ahead of me, used all my talking points. I'm like, shit.
Of course they did. Yep.
I was like, well, I like to tell my story, and I like to tell it early, often, and as authentically as I can. And I just share all of it. And I've been an open book. So that's, I think, what my secret sauce is. You can't just say I'm fundraising, because raising for cancer research is important to me. Like, get into the why. And I explained why. And I was like, I've never told my story before. So if I cry, but I want you to know that I'm just telling it from the depths of my soul. Here goes. Yeah. And when I did, the side chats blowing up, and people, you realize there's many runners on the team that don't really have a deep connection to cancer, but they just want to run the Boston Marathon. Mm-hmm. Like, can you speak at my fundraiser? And I'm like, oh, there's my purpose. I'm going to speak at their fundraiser and I'm going to learn a little bit more about my purpose. Okay, sign me up. I'll speak at your. And so then Dana-Farber calls me up and they're like, hey, you did so well on that Zoom call. And we heard you did great at so-and-so's fundraising efforts at their fundraiser. Can ABC and Channel 5 come to your house tomorrow? And I was like, tomorrow? They're like, yeah, we just want to do a little episode on the marathon. It'll be real quick. Now, me being me, like I did my research. I looked at every Dana-Farber runner who had ever done something on Channel 5 before. I'm on the dark side of the web for that. And I'm like, I need a glam squad at my house. And like everyone's like, no runners need a glam squad. I'm like, I need a glam squad. So I like call on my people to come in at like 5 a.m. They're in my driveway at 8 o'clock. I'm running in full glam makeup, right? I'm like, we're going and we're doing this right, you know?
What do you mean? I always look like this.
Oh, yeah. So my sisters go on with me, full glam, and we record our episode. And we're like so excited to do something on TV, tell our story, tell the story of our aunt, talk about our mom, talk about our family experience, and just hope that somebody can see that you can do really hard things and still come out and be okay. So that airs and it goes off well. And then Dana-Farber calls me again. They're like, hey, the night before the marathon, would you like to tell your story at the pasta party? And I was like, okay, sure. But like, isn't this a lot of me? You guys use me for the panel. You're using me for TV. Like, we need more of your story because your story has a really happy ending. You're outpacing cancer. So I was like, shit, all right. I might find my purpose in that room. And I was still every time waiting for this, like big thing to come out of the sky and be like, here's what your purpose is, Kristina. Now that you told your story, release it. So I realized I was in a room full of over 1,000 people telling my story, and I had never told that. So like I had to get over any fear of speaking at that point. I go and tell my story, and I wanted to connect it to everybody in the room. I got thrown a major curveball that day. So Dana-Farber usually partners you with a patient partner if you'd like, and it's usually a pediatric patient partner. And so I had a little girl named Zoe who was 7 years old, and she didn't know anything about my story. It was all about her, and she'd be waiting for me at mile 25. And that was a really big motivation to kind of get me there. But here's the thing that I glazed over and didn't tell you guys. So it's not a great idea to have a complete hysterectomy and then run a marathon, because tools go through your hips when you have a complete hysterectomy. And obviously when something destroys your hips, it weakens your knees. I tore my meniscus in January and did not run on land in training at all. So I was in a deep end of a pool doing fluid running from January until April. And I had no idea if this would translate to being capable of running the Boston Marathon post-surgery. But I had so much going on in my headspace of like, I am so screwed. This is going to this is not the way that I wanted this to go down. I wanted this big avid medal moment of, and I'm all in my mind. And I was like, I got to just think about Zoe and Zoe's journey. And she's facing pediatric cancer. And this is the best thing for me to focus on is somebody else. So I put my energy towards Zoe. And on the night where I gave my first keynote speech, I was introduced after the pediatric memoriam. And Zoe was right next to me. And I was like, how the hell am I supposed to get up on stage now? But I'm going to do it. And I'm going to have to unite this room and be a message of hope. And so my speech was about how we are all the drivers. And even though there are no cars on the course, we are the drivers of our health. And if we sit and become the passenger, it's okay to do that from time to time, but you have to realize that you're always the driver. And on the course, you will realize that in Boston, there are people on the sidelines and they're whispering to themselves, someday I want to be just like that driver of their health, of their life. I want to be just like that runner. Look at them doing that. You inspire people when you are the driver of a race, when you are the driver of your health, whether you are a patient, a caregiver, a family member, it's so important to realize that life is not a dress rehearsal. All we have is now. And I told my story. And when I got off the stage, I didn't know what to expect, but the whole room erupted and was standing, and I had a standing ovation, and it clicked in my mind. I'm like, oh, this is what I'm meant to be doing. I'm meant to be telling my story to be able to help other people realize that they can do really difficult things. So, Eric, I know you have questions about Do It Scared.
Oh, I want to hear some race stories, but I was just writing a note. This is one of my favorite guest segments ever. I wrote a note. This has Dave McGilvery and Catherine Switcher vibes because you're such a good storyteller and you're just taking over. You know, you're such a good speaker. You know your story. I can tell you've done this before. And it's so like, I'm so engaged listening in on the story. So I'm loving the story. What I want to know soon. All right, let's go back.
Yeah.
First, so we're a storytelling podcast, and we'd love to hear the good and the bad stories. Sometimes the code browns, right? But I do want to go back at some point, and we can do that right now, and we'll come back. And we love to hear stories of, like, you've done the majors now, and we've skimmed over, you ran Chicago, and we skimmed over New York was super slow, and then you did Boston. But I want to know, like, you did Boston right after having surgery, and you mentioned the knee, but how did training go in the winter after surgery? And then I don't even think I mentioned it in the intro. Last week you were in Berlin. So you're working on your world majors. You got 4 down, 2 to go. Let's go in order. Let's hear how Chicago went.
Chicago was incredible. I had 30 people came out to watch. So that was incredible. And the mindset was that you don't know for your first marathon if you're going to finish, right? Like you have this, oh my God, you only get to X amount of miles and and knee, and it doesn't seem right. And the fact is that Chicago was my best time in running a marathon still to this day. I count Berlin as my best marathon ever, even because I will explain why. But Chicago was so incredible. The course was amazing. It was so live, so fun. It was flat, which is awesome. But I would say that I felt so alive running Chicago, and I felt like the most victorious version of myself when I realized I could. When you get to that point, because you're always fighting the, like, do I want to give up? Can I not? Am I going to get there? Am I not? And you have like those two voices that are either like throttle up or slow down going on in your voice. And that was the first time in my life where it was like everything kind of went numb. And I was just like, I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. Wow. That thing that I said, someday I'm going to do this, I'm doing it. And that was by far the coolest to know that I could. New York sucked because I went from running a 4:33 for my first marathon to, I think it was like 5:12 or 5:18. But it was like, I crossed over the 5 threshold. I'm like, oh my God, why do I suck so bad? I can tell you why. I had 2 kids, never really slept at that point. I had a young kid at the time, like I had 2 toddlers. So you're not sleeping. I'm having my training and recovery was not the same. I was squeezing in miles whenever I could, but also I
sounds like me.
Yeah, it wasn't in flow, but I will say I was really hard on myself and really negative going into the New York Marathon. Boston was one where it was like, I know I can finish a marathon, but I'm pretty hurt right now. I'm in a lot of pain. I went for cortisone injections that didn't work. I was just like, I have to run with heart now. Like now it's just like, if the broom comes out, the broom comes out. It's one foot in front of the other. I have to keep going. And so I got worse from New York. It was like 5:28. And that feeling afterwards was so defeating to the ego of like, Boston was my worst experience and my worst time. But also I was so proud because the night before I gave my first keynote speech, and there's something to say about speaking on stage in front of 1,000 people. And then the next day having to go run a marathon, you're like, it was my first time doing it. So I was like, you know what? It's just take the whole experience as it is. it is what it is. Just don't think about it from a running perspective. Think about the fact that you personally just raised $33,000. So
wow.
Shit.
like,
I think you should give yourself some grace because
totally,
of what
but like
you've
you're
gone
not a
through.
runner.
Yeah.
What do? You go into that like mindset of
We're
like,
our own worst enemies, and
yeah,
I totally get it. But from a bystander's point of view, you have been through like just bodily trauma with the major
totally.
surgeries and
So
the
here's the
side
thing.
effects.
Hear this
So,
though.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
Chicago, I was running before a mastectomy. New
Yeah.
York, I was running after a mastectomy.
Yep.
Boston, I was running after a hysterectomy. And then I go to run
Yes.
Berlin and I'm like, I don't have trauma right now. It's all good. Why am I doing this? So I knew it was because of the majors, but I was a part of the first international Dana-Farber team. Dana-Farber called me up and they were like, hey,
Wow.
we know that you'd like to run the majors and we have our first team for Berlin. You in? I'm like,
Wow.
it doesn't make any sense for me to do it this year, but I'm in. Like, I'm in.
You're
Me
not
and
one to say no. I
no,
would be the same way.
no. And then on top of that, they were like, here's a bonus. You get to choose where your funds go. Whatever
Wow.
you choose where you would like it to go. And I'm like, I'm going to have it go to BRCA research. So let's go.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, I think as of right now, I'm at $25,000. This time it was harder to fundraise because people are more generous for Boston, just being from here. I think everybody knows and they're educated now. It's like, you're asking
Definitely.
for money again. You're doing Berlin. It's 26.2, like people still ask that question.
Yeah.
But I will say my sister and I together, my other sister who does not have the BRCA mutation ran this one with me. My sister who's ran the other ones just had a baby last month. She was so
Oh my
upset
gosh.
to not be able to, but we were like, sorry, we're going without you for this one. It was just like it was a unicorn of an opportunity, right? Like we got to raise up for
Understandable.
this very thing. So we just got back from Berlin on Wednesday. And when I tell you, first of all, Eric, have you done it?
I've done it twice.
You have, Erica? Oh my gosh. Okay.
fun.
So I loved it. Like, I think it's been my favorite one since, as far as course wise. I'm so impressed. Okay. They gave out bananas like as an official snack. I was like, this is amazing to have bananas and cut up fruit. I swear that made me do so well. The bananas are what kept me going. But anyway, I had the worst anxiety I've ever had running the Berlin Marathon. The morning of, my parents came out. My husband stayed back with the kids, but my parents came with my sister, and my sister ran the race. And as we were together as a team in the morning, I was like, had that feeling like I'm going to start crying and I don't know why. And my sister was like,
overwhelmed.
You're gonna finish. Like, you're gonna finish. You know you're gonna finish. Why are you? I was like, my stomach doesn't feel right. I don't feel right. I didn't sleep. I don't know. I just feel like I've always been running from something. And now I feel like I'm running towards something. And I started to like feel my eyes well up and I was like, I don't want to talk anymore. I just gotta go ground. I gotta go ground into myself. And so I have this book and it's by Kyle Gray. I don't know if you know who he is, but his books are phenomenal. And it really taught me, I learned that we have 5 bodies within our body. So we have a physical body, a mental body, an emotional body, an energetic body, and a spiritual body.
Okay.
And my spiritual body knew that I needed to focus on myself in this moment. And I picked up Kyle Gray's book, and it's like you kind of take a moment and you flip open a page, and whatever page you open up to is the message you are meant to receive. And so I read it, and it was all about being gentle with yourself and talking to yourself in a way. So when we go over our little commandments of, oh crap.
Yes.
There you go. You read the notes, unlike Erica.
I sure did read those notes. Thou shalt not have negative self-talk would be mine. You need to have positive self-talk, because
I'm writing it down.
when I tell you, everything was working against me in Berlin when it came to, I'll be honest with you guys, I did not put the work in for Berlin the way that you should for a marathon. I went to Italy this summer for 2 weeks during like a great portion of training. And then I fell off the wagon a little bit afterwards. I made tons of excuses. And then I got to a point where I was only squeezing in the long runs and not doing the other runs. And I just didn't put in the work. And so that anxiety of like, oh man, did I do enough? Did I do enough for this? I'll finish, but like, shit, did I do enough? Really kicked in. And it wasn't taper time. It was like every long run got pretty bad where I was like, oh man, I'm getting really tired. Everything hurts. And I'm at mile 9 and like just living in that, like, I'm not enough mindset.
It's so hard to get out of your head when you're stuck in there. It's a real tough thing. The struggle is real.
So this is where like the good running story comes in for Berlin. So I'm running with my sister and I felt pretty good. She felt pretty good. We're running alongside and we're talking real nice to each other. You know, I'm like, oh, damn, look at us. We are feeling good. We are feeling it today. And we're like, I'm running alongside her. I'm like, strong legs, strong mind. Let's fucking go. And I'm like, literally like going back and forth. And I'm like, woohoo, no music's playing. I'm just talking. And she's just like, okay, keep going. And I'm like, yeah, look at us. We're doing this. I was like, are you seeing this pace? We're at negative split, bitch. Like we're like literally running and like, woohoo, like laughing. And then I'm at the half marathon point and I'm like, God damn, look at this. We're doing it. And I'm like, yeah, like literally crazy person talking. Get to mile 18 and I turn back and my sister's dropping behind me. And I remember the passage that I read about like, you need to just stay focused and believe in yourself. And I turned around and I never do this, but I turned and I waved. And I was like, I'll see you at the finish. And I focused on myself. I'm the big sister. So typically it's always like, I got you, don't worry. You know, I was like, no, I got to focus on me. So at mile 18, I was still feeling really good, but you know, it's marathoning. So like you could shit the bed at mile 21 and you're still thinking about that in the back of your mind. Like, do I throttle up now?
It's true.
And so by the way, Erica, you know, it's in kilometers the entire time. So I'm doing so much math. I'm horrific. I'm a great speaker.
I give up on that.
Math. So I'm over here, like starting from the beginning, like 5K, 3 miles, 10K. Okay. And I'm like going through it. I'm like, okay, we're at this amount. And I'm talking to myself, doing all of the math, being like, oh my God, I cannot fuck this up. I'm going to do better than Boston and New York, no matter what. Oh my God. Oh my God. And I'm literally like, everybody's German, right? So I'm like, yeah. I'm like, nobody's listening around me. I'm like, okay, never mind. I'm like crying, like you like asking me in German if I'm okay. And I'm like, I'm great. So I'm realizing, I'm like, oh my God, this is better than PRing because this is a post-surgical PR. I'm doing better post-surgery than I could have ever imagined. I can't compete with 29-year-old me that had one kid and all her body parts, right? Like I got to rewrite my script and stop being so hard on myself. But then there's this moment at mile 24 where I'm like, oh shit, if I turn it up, I'm breaking 5 hours too. So now I'm like, I'm not, and if I don't dial up and I get like 5:01, I have to live with that time forever. No way. I'm like, I can't live with that. I'm that close. No way. So what felt like sprinting, which we all know wasn't, but felt like sprinting at mile 24, my family is at mile 25 and they know I always like, you flew all the way to Germany. I'm going to give you a hug. And this time I see them. My mom has like balloons because our Dana-Farber chain raised over 100K. So my mom was holding up a 100 and we were a mighty small team. So my mom's holding up the blue balloons that say 100 and I'm sobbing and I'm like, I'm gonna PR. I'll see you at the finish. Don't make me hug you. Oh. And my dad can't figure out what's going on. He's like, what do you need? Are you okay? And I'm like, I love you. I'll see you at the finish. And I'm looking at my watch and I'm like, I hope I got this math right. And then I'm still like, don't have a zillion more kilometers to go. And I'm like mentally like, I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to do it. And then Erica knows the Brandenburg Gate is this big monument that you're running under. And the friggin' finish line is like a goddamn mirage. It's a half mile after it. It's 800 meters after it. And so I'm like at the Brandenburg Gate. I'm like literally going, don't fail. And like, that's where all the cameras are on you. So like there were no cameras on the course, but all my pictures are ugly crying at the finish line being like, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. So I'm screaming, talking to myself, swearing at the top of my lungs. And I made it across the finish line at 4 hours, 58 minutes and 45 seconds. I was like, oh, and I was pulling out my shirt. I'm like, I was getting my medal, and I'm like in the lady's face that doesn't speak English, and I'm like, let's fucking go. She's like,
I feel like that's the universal language. Everybody knows what that means.
She's looking at me, being like, do you need a medic? Yes, I do.
Oh my God.
I never do this again. What am I doing? But I had like this big moment, and I'm sobbing, and I'm like, I am so proud. I am so proud that I did not give up, because given the opportunity, it was like my legs were feeling like, just walk right now. And everything inside of me was just like, just push it. Don't give up on you. Don't give up on you. And that feeling was just like, I could ride that high still, of just like, I am so glad I didn't give up on me. Because
we are so proud of you.
Though, right? Like, you battle that feeling of like throttle up, throttle down. And
But congratulations, that was the best story. You put so much life and heart into that, and we felt it. And we are just so incredibly proud of you for not only getting a post-surgery PR, but also raising all that money for Dana-Farber. We know, especially like, you got to choose where it went. That is just even more special. And I mean, even though your training may not have been where you wanted it to, you fucking crushed it.
Thank you. I mean, like I said, there's something about, obviously I want to be this like Boston qualifier gal that you can be so proud of, but inside I was like,
don't we all?
Who gives a shit? Like, I was like, honestly, I'm just enjoying this for what it is. And I have found myself here, and now I know my purpose, guys.
Good for you. Oh, we're so proud. And we can't thank you enough for sharing all of these stories with us. I mean, it is so beneficial to have you on here to teach us about, like, this is a whole different realm of cancer that I had no idea about, to be honest. So everybody, here's your warning sign, or here's your sign to go get checked for the BRCA genes and see
you too, Erica,
if you're at extra risk. I know.
If you have a family history, bring it up to your doctor. And the best thing that you can do is just know the age in which somebody in your family was diagnosed and the time frame, for sure.
But
you ever thought about writing a book?
Ooh, would read
it right now. Yes.
I already got the name for it.
Tell me.
Outpacing Cancer.
Okay.
But there's a close second was the Foobs tour. So I think you'll call it on your book tour. You'll call it the Foobs book tour.
That's right.
Yep.
Absolutely.
You're an amazing speaker, and you've only been one for a few years now. What is speaking like, and what was maybe that first? We know the first big speech you had was in front of 1,000 people the night before the Boston Marathon. Like, what were you doing the night before to prepare for this, while also preparing for a marathon?
I'll tell you, there wasn't anything really special. It was just one of those moments where I had written out my speech and thought about it an awful lot, and I just knew that my goal was to unite the room. I knew that there were people there for different reasons, whether they were experiencing cancer, a parent, a pediatric patient, a runner's spouse. And I wanted everyone to leave feeling like whatever life throws at you, you're in charge. And do it scared came from that very moment, because if you were to know how I felt in that moment, I was very scared. I mean, I was like, wow, I'm speaking in front of 1,000 people with a child holding my hand who has cancer, with talking about death, talking about my family story. Another thing I would mention is that my children were in the audience, and my children each have a 50% risk of inheriting this mutation. What's it going to be like when I have to now have this discussion with them? And all of these things. What was really funny was the morning after I spoke, a teammate came up to me and they were like, so I know you're a Syracuse grad. I can see you went to Syracuse Communication School. You speak so clearly. I was like, actually, I didn't get good enough SAT scores to go to Syracuse. However, I went to Quinnipiac, and yes, I was a comm major. But thank you. That was a really great compliment. And I love the fact that this was my first time doing it and nobody would have known that I did it scared. And that messaging is that no matter what it is in life, you can sit back and tell yourself, like, someday I'd like to do that. Or you can just start by doing it scared. It's the best thing that anyone had ever said. Just do it anyway. Just do it. Do it scared.
What do you got to lose?
Exactly. Not doing it sucks. Who wants to live with regret? Imagine I wouldn't know what my purpose was. I wouldn't be here telling my story with you. You just have to keep going.
I love you so much, Kristina.
Oh, I love you guys too. This is fun.
I think I really do appreciate you just coming on, being so candid, bringing the energy. Oh my gosh, bringing the energy.
That's like I didn't even mention it before, but I always tell people, like, this podcast survives and thrives on energy. And you had it. Like, this whole episode has been, like, engaging, I think, for anyone who's listening. It's been fantastic. And we're not done.
No, I did my homework. I'm ready to figure out, like, what are we adding to the playlist, guys? What's on?
You tell me, Kristina. You tell me. Well, you get one song, though, because Eric is a big buzzkill. And
I have one, and I'll tell you, and it comes with a story, of course. But
go for it.
I will tell you that my surgeon, before I got put under from my mastectomy, said to me, you get one song. What song do you want to make sure you hear? Mm-hmm. And I looked up at her and I was like, the only song that I request all the time that makes me feel like me, and at any wedding or anything I've ever been to. And she's just like, who has that much? Like, you're about to have a mastectomy. And I'm like, so can you play Michael Jackson PYT? And she's like, for your mastectomy? I'm like, yeah, we're going. If I'm going down, I'm going out being like, where did you come from, babe?
That is a great song.
That away, won't you, baby? And so she's like, I'm like, maybe it's the drugs, and I didn't have to me at that point. And I was like, just kidding. I don't know. Are we going to play this? So I remember as I was going under, the OR was blaring PYT, and I just knew that as I was counting backwards from 10, listening to PYT, that someday I would feel like me in there if I heard that song again. And of course I still do. So PYT for sure.
It's all yours. And that is a certified banger. I love that song. My dad approves. He loves Michael Jackson. So if it's Don Hamill approved, you know it's good.
Yeah.
And then we touched on it earlier. Your code brown commandment is thou shall, what was it, Erica? Something about the negative voices?
Thou shall not talk negatively about yourself.
Yeah, no negative self-talk. I will tell you, that is what I think made the difference at the end of Berlin, saying to myself, strong leg, strong mind, you got this. And like continuously and that is not me, just so you know. Like, I'm usually the first one to be like, holy fuck, I do not have this. Or like, I can tell you, like, the first thing I thought in training was like, I am not enough. This is not enough. But you know, like, that's what we do. Our first line of defense typically is like, oh shit, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do enough. I didn't do enough.
Those mental walls, just, they take so much work to get through. But once you do, it's worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
Kristina, let's touch on a newspaper that has a paywall, so I don't read it. But I actually think, so everything's lining up for me here. You met Jay last year, and you met her at the Boston Marathon. You hugged her at mile 25. And it must have been when you were making these posts about the Wall Street Journal. They wrote an article about boob jobs, and Jay was reposting everything you posted. And that's when Jay and I kind of talked, and she goes, she would be amazing for breast cancer awareness month. And at the time I was thinking, oh, she must have had breast cancer, because that would be why. And then this turned out even better, because you never have, but you've taken actions to prevent it. That's not where I'm going though here. The Wall Street Journal article, tell us about that article. Tell us, like, how you came across that article and your approach to it.
So my husband's in finance, and the Wall Street Journal gets delivered to my house every single day. It's at the bottom of my long ass driveway. He goes and picks it up, and all of a sudden he opens it up and sees that there's an article about a mastectomy, and it refers to a mastectomy as a boob job in the headline. And so I was like, he just glazed over it and was like, hey, you might like this. And as soon as I opened it up, I was like, no fucking way. And he was like, what? I go,
hell no.
Me so mad. And he was like, what? And I'm like, they're referring to it. No. And then I'm like reading it 15 times over and I'm like, don't have rage, don't have rage, don't have rage. And I'm like, this is the Wall Street Journal? Are we for real? And then what was really funny was that I didn't realize nobody really reads the Wall Street Journal unless you're in finance, like my husband. So I'm like, good to know. Talking it on Instagram, I create this reel, right? And I'm just basically calling out that this is bullshit. There's how can you refer to it as that? And
was it written by a man?
It's written by a woman who had a mastectomy.
Oh, come on.
The call's coming from within the house. Like, what the fuck? You know, like, what is
I had to ask, though. I had to.
No, I was so mad. And so I call it out. And when I call it out, it becomes this like thing. Oh, what a wild week of my life. It ate away a whole week. But I call it out. And there's now a movement behind me. And I had no idea that I didn't know I was the only one calling it out. Mm-hmm. Then I had no idea that I had an army of angry people behind me. And it got pretty dicey because I created a mob pretty much by place. But it wasn't intentional, but it was pretty much by saying like, hey, wait a minute, you don't get to refer to this as this because let's state factually it's not. First of all, this implants that are used for mastectomy reconstruction are not the same as when you even have an amputation. So from even on every angle, and then I had a roundtable discussion. I have surgeons in my back pocket ready to throw down. I'm on the phone with the editor being like, you need to change this. Like, so we're going back and forth through email. And it was really funny because the editor spelled some things wrong in my email. And then I was being a jackass and calling her out for that, being like, hey, listen, you need to spell these things correctly because if you're not going to give me the respect by retracting the headline here, like she was just basically being like, we've never had so many clicks. And I was like, because people are angry. It's not, you're now.
Yeah. Not the good kind of clicks.
Yeah. You're ruining your own integrity here. And I was like, and here's the thing, why this is so problematic. We kept getting in this debate back and forth about the term boob job because it refers to a mastectomy as a boob job. And I said, the word boob job is not what's offending me. She kept saying, I'm so sorry you're upset about slang. I was like, I'm not upset about slang. I'm upset that factually you are taking and calling something that causes so much trauma and reducing my experience and every woman who's ever faced a mastectomy's experience. And when you do that, what you're realizing or failing to recognize is that these very women who are facing your readers as they're trying to receive their reconstruction to be covered by insurance. So your readers are the people we face, and you're reducing our experience. And as a woman, when you reduce our experience to a boob job, you're basically taking away everything that we advocate for. This is not okay. This is gross. You need to fix this. And she essentially went back and forth with me saying that she would not do so and to just please read her book. I was like, okay.
Fat chance, lady.
I will let me now go a different route. I will buy 10 copies of the book and circulate it myself with my own personal funds around the breast cancer community if you retract the headline. Make a statement. Nobody reads a redaction. Like if it comes in the next week, I will know. So I'm now at this point fighting with the Wall Street Journal, and we're having a well-educated discussion back and forth. But then you have like the crazies on the internet that come out and they start making death threats to the writer of the article. And the editor's like, you got to stop your people. I'm like, my people? They're not my people. You just pissed everybody off. You just redact the headline. Like I didn't, I'm just a person calling you out. I'm sorry that like 1,000 other people are now doing the same, but you need to do it. And then it was like people referring to me as their hero. And then I was a villain to some people because some people were like, you're just trying to tear down this woman. The author of the article was a woman. You're trying to tear down another woman. I'm like, I am not trying to tear. I will buy her books. I will buy 10 of her books if she just comes out and says, a mastectomy is not a boob job. I'm very sorry for referring it to as one. And then she made a public statement saying, I didn't even write the headline. I was like, well, who did? ChatGPT? Fix it. Like, just fix it. She couldn't do it, would not do it.
Oh my God.
So it became a moment where I realized that like your voice, there's another like do it scared. I'm sitting here being like, so no one's gonna call this bitch out. Like you just get to do that. Like I was just like,
wow,
okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say it because this isn't. And I'm not looking for confrontation, but I am looking for somebody to just be like, just so you understand too, in the breast cancer community, we have had insurance companies change codes so women don't have to pay their bills. And Jay even sent me what her bills were looking like from her surgeries. And it's like, these women are facing tens of thousands of dollars in debt because they can't get their insurance to cover their surgery. So you're going to reduce it to calling it a boob job? This is so that they still can have their same shape that they had before cancer. It's no one's fault that they had cancer. Like, come on, this is not an elective, like, I want bigger boobs surgery. So let's not reduce it. I'm still bringing a lot of energy for
you are.
That's heavy though. We can tell you're so passionate about it. And you should be. You absolutely should be. And I applaud you for stepping up and trying to correct something that was just blatantly wrong.
Well, they never retracted the headline. And then I needed to make reels to calm the people down, being like, we're going to all take a breather this weekend and we'll probably never get an apology, but no one's tried Thornton's book. Okay. Nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. You tried, and that's all you really can do. At least you know in your heart that you made a stand.
Just had to kind of just say, like, I'm going to have some balls of steel right now and go for it.
You. I hate confrontation. I would be, if it were me, like the writer, I'd be like, I'll fix it immediately. I'm so sorry. But like, they don't work like that.
I was hoping that she would. She actually liked the fact that she pissed people off, which made me even more mad. You know,
that could be a journalistic thing, right? Yeah.
Probably nobody knew who she was until this happened.
Yeah, it's not the way you want to be known. Like,
no, and she just like used so much controversy in her writing. Like the name of her book was called "Tits Up." It was like, and it's all about how our society, and to a degree, I agree with some of her theories. Like we put so much emphasis on boobs that we don't need to, and that like even like we grieve things that we don't need to. That wouldn't we want to save a woman? Why do we have like? I agree with a lot of her standpoints. However, not the headline. There's a big problem with that. So
they're getting the clicks for the wrong reasons. It happens all the time. Unfortunately, it's happening right now to the guy we all know who just went to jail. He makes music, and now he's making more and more millions with his music because everyone's listening to it again.
I know. Yeah,
it's exactly. Like if you take a stand and you just take the songs off Spotify, and then he makes nothing. But instead, he's making millions in jail.
It's crazy. So, it's the same thing. It's essentially like, okay, so you're profiting off of disaster.
Bad shit. Yeah.
Exactly. Bad shit is the way to put it, for sure.
Yeah. So Kristina Coccoluto, I said it wrong.
Close.
Yeah, close.
You got to give him like 2 or 3 times. He'll get it eventually.
The best part is I love the name. It's like I'm going to love saying it all the time. Coccoluto is how I have it written down here. What's next for you? I know you got 2 more world majors to go. Are those on your radar right now, or do you have anything else? I know you're like me. You need it in the calendar. You need the challenge to do it.
So now I have like a whole other, I want Tokyo next because I'd like to now, since I'm not getting the Abbott in Boston, I'd like to do it in London.
There you go.
I would like to do it in London for a few reasons. One, I heard it's more celebratory than Tokyo, but then I know I can get my people to London to see me. It would be harder to get everyone to convince them
Tokyo
to go.
Tokyo is a stretch. It's a long, long flight.
Have you done it, Erica? Tokyo Marathon?
Yep. I got the 6 stars at home. I got the medal.
That amazing.
I finished last year in Tokyo, and it was just me and my mom. So I get how you want to be there with your family. So if you can, London is the place. London comes out in force. You will have crowds you won't even know what to do with.
Yeah, I heard it's really celebratory. So I was like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it there. But if I can't get a number and it comes the other way, it does. But I'm really hoping the universe.
Is Dana-Farber going to continue the international races? Like you said, it was their first time.
That is the plan, and they're working on it. But then they were like, "Well, we can get you one for London." I'm like, let's see. I'll hold out on that one until we can, but you guys will laugh. I have an in. This is so funny. So the gentleman that I get Botox from was like, "Oh, my best friend happens to be in the Japanese consulate." I'm like, "Really?" He was saying to me because he was joking, being like, "You got to cut this running shit. Your face gets it metabolizes Botox faster when you run." And I was like, "Oh, well, I got 2 more to go after this, and then I will." And he's like, "What do you have to do?" I'm like, "Tokyo and London, but it's so hard to get a number for Tokyo. I don't know." And he was like, "My best friend works for the Japanese consulate. She can get you a number." And I was like, "We might have to work that connection, and then I'll come back and you can shoot my face up and we'll go." So.
However you can do it, just get the bib.
Yeah, that's what I said. I was like, I at this point, I'll freeze my face as much as you can if it means that I can get a number for Tokyo.
Love it. Love it. I can't wait to see you get the 6-star. And then I haven't done any world major yet, but eventually I will, and I will be running Boston last. That's my plan. So when I do, I want you there at the finish line.
Oh, yeah,
absolutely. Or at mile 25, 19, mile 2, somewhere there.
You can find me right underneath the sicko sign for sure.
There you go. Celebrations.
Well, Kristina, this was amazing. You're an amazing speaker. You really are. This had the Catherine Switcher vibes, the David McGillivray vibes. They know their story. You ran with it, and I feel like it was so engaging. So it was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the pod, sharing your story. This was a blast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
The pleasure is seriously ours, Kristina. We think you're so awesome, and just keep bringing that energy everywhere you go. You're just a ray of sunshine.
Guys, I really hope you enjoyed that. I think it was great having her on to talk about, because she never had breast cancer, but to talk about the actions she took before because of her high risk. I think that was great. I hope you all enjoyed that. Kristina Coccoluto on the On the Runs podcast.